This is Medical Device Legal News. Today is April 18th, 2023. I'm Sam Bernstein. On April 11th, the EPA released a proposed rule under the Clean Air Act to address emissions from sterilization facilities that use ethylene oxide, and also released a separate proposed interim decision under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act to protect workers and potentially reduce usage by medical device manufacturer sterilizers. The proposed rule under the Clean Air Act would adopt ETO emission limits, require commercial sterilizers to adopt new emission control measures to reduce ETO emissions, to monitor their emissions, and also to adopt additional reporting requirements. A virtual public hearing regarding the rule under the Clean Air Act is currently scheduled for May 2nd and May 3rd, and comments can be received on the rule and should be sent prior to or on June 12th. Under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act interim registration review decision, the EPA is seeking to prohibit certain uses of ETO where alternatives exist. The EPA is also seeking to limit medical device sterilization use of ETO to 500 milligrams per liter for both new and existing sterilization cycles. The EPA proposes a 2-year compliance timeframe for new cycles and a 5-year timeline for existing sterilization cycles. This would also require the maintenance of records of the amount of ETO used in each sterilization cycle, the adoption of controls to reduce worker exposure, such as emission capture technology, as well as the use of personal protective equipment in sterilization activities. Comments under this interim registration review decision are due by June 12th. On April 14th, Arcania Vargas pled guilty to conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud for paying doctors for medically unnecessary durable medical equipment orders in a $5.5 million Medicare fraud scheme. The kickbacks alleged in this case were allegedly disguised as payments for marketing services performed by her various entities, which were DME POS suppliers. This case is a good opportunity to revisit the need to conduct appropriate diligence on any marketing companies you hire, as well as independent contractor sales representatives, to ensure they have appropriate compliance training and an effective compliance program in place. Unfortunately, on occasion, we've seen unscrupulous marketing companies and sales representatives engage in inappropriate financial relationships with existing and potential customers to drive business in potential violation of the federal anti-kickback statute. And it's important, even if they're independent contractors, to ensure that they're following appropriate compliance safeguards. On April 12th, the FDA issued additional question and answer guidance regarding a risk-based approach to monitoring clinical investigations. This guidance is an update from 2013 guidance on risk-based approaches to monitoring clinical investigations and focuses on recommendations for planning a monitoring approach, developing the content of a monitoring plan, and addressing and communicating monitoring results. As you're aware, the FDA's guidance documents do not establish legally enforceable responsibilities and rather describe the agency's current thinking on a topic and should be viewed as recommendations. This guidance provides that sponsors should implement a system to manage risk to participants and to data integrity, including a risk-based approach that is tailored to potential risk for specific clinical investigations. This process should entail identifying critical data and the processes necessary for subject protection and data integrity, both at the protocol design stage as well as with an eye towards risks that may develop during an investigation. It also addresses performing a risk assessment and determining whether risk to data and processes can be mitigated or eliminated through revisions to the protocol investigational plan, and when risk cannot be mitigated through modifications to the protocol or the investigational plan, to address how critical risks will be identified, tracked, and mitigated throughout the duration of investigation. The questions addressed by this guidance include what the purpose is of conducting a risk assessment, which is to optimize the study quality data by eliminating or mitigating risks to subjects and data protection. It also spends time addressing the fact that sponsors should consider and continue to monitor additional risks that arise during the investigation, including less likely risks that could have a significant impact, not just risks that are important and identified during the initial risk assessment stages likely to occur. If you have good clinical coordinators and good personnel, they may spot some of these issues during an investigation, but it is important to have a plan together to both identify those risks as they occur and have a plan to mitigate them, especially if you have a multi-site investigation. Risk may pop up at one site, and you'll want to potentially implement a risk mitigation plan at all sites to address risks as they become apparent throughout your investigation, even if they are just coming up at a particular site. Questions also addressed by the guidance include the factors that sponsors should consider when determining the types, timing, frequency, and extent of monitoring activities, how centralized monitoring can help minimize missing data and protocol deviations. That's particularly important, and if you have a multi-site investigation, making sure that all of your sites are appropriately following the protocol, and if you're starting to see deviations, perhaps consider retraining not only at the site where the deviation occurred, but at multiple sites to ensure that the same deviations don't happen site-wide. The guidance also addresses why monitoring approaches should include processes to ensure that appropriate blinding to the extent it's present in your investigation is maintained. Additional elements that you can consider to include a monitoring plan. And the last two topics include how sponsors should follow up with and address issues identified through the monitoring plan and the appropriate ways to document monitoring activities. So interesting update on a risk-based approach to monitoring clinical investigations, and some of the guidance here should be helpful in developing plans in advance to avoid issues that arise during a trial that perhaps may not have been addressed in your original protocol or investigation plan. On April 14th, the FDA finalized its guidance regarding 510(k) submissions for peripheral percutaneous transluminal angioplasty and specialty catheters. On April 12, 2023, Danco Laboratories agreed to pay $765,000 to resolve False Claims Act allegations that it failed to pay customs duties on imported pharmaceutical products that failed to identify their country of origin. While this case did not involve medical device companies and medical device products, the same issue pertains in the medical device space. This case is an important reminder that all imported foreign products must be marked with their country of origin, and that failing to pay marketing duties and tariffs may lead to False Claims Act liability. Important to consider tariffs in sourcing your products and goods, and ensure that appropriate labeling as well as marks are included on imported products to avoid these types of issues. Again, thank you for joining us today for Medical Device Legal News. I'm Sam Bernstein, a partner of McFarland's Healthcare Group. I'd like to say a special thank you this week to my colleague, Sophie Moros, for helping make today's episode possible. Look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much for your time.